Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Pleased to be joined by George Eichhorn and
Hello.
Smoking Jeremy B, who's dealing with some fleet issues back up in upstate Michigan. Well, we're glad you made it here safely, Jeremy. That's all that
You know,
matters.
when you work an hour from home and it takes you almost an hour and a half, that's fun.
I got to say, bad weather to me, there's no innocent way to go ahead and describe that. So, just give everybody an overview of what we're talking about here. Okay, that it'll be our Daytona 500 special. Candy Ebling and I will be going there tomorrow night. Great American race. Always something I wanted to do. And now we'll have an opportunity to do that. We were just there a couple of weeks ago covering the Rolex 24. Made a notice with my cap. So, with that said, I'm going to go over some basic things here. The Daytona 500 qualifying results. Alex Bowman wins the pole for the Great American Race a third time. Bowman becomes the seventh driver in history to win the Daytona 500 pole at least three times. Now, I'm going to go over a lot of facts, so hang with me, folks, okay? Alex Bowman won the pole for the 65th running of the Daytona 500 on Wednesday night, posting a lap of 181.866 miles per hour in the final round of qualifying to win his third Daytona 500 pole and the fourth of his career overall. Bowman was also the Daytona 500 pole winner in 2018 and 2021, and this also marks his record-setting sixth consecutive front row start in this race. A couple more facts, and then we'll get to some commentary. Bowman becomes the seventh driver in NASCAR history to win the Daytona 500 pole at least three times, joining fellow three-peat pole winners Fireball Roberts from 61 to 63, Ken Schrader 88 to 90, and Dale Jarrett 95, 2000, 2005. Buddy Baker, Cal Yarbrough, and Bill Elliott all hold the overall record at four apiece. It isn't good enough. We'll give you some more information, folks. Okay. Despite a valiant effort by the Stewart Haas Racing's Chase Briscoe, who held the pole for much of round one before fading to sixth in round two, time trial qualifying saw Hendrick Motorsports once again sweep the front row for the Daytona 500. And with Kyle Larson qualifying second at 181.057, Bowman's pole is the 16th Daytona 500 pole for Hendrick Motorsports and the eighth time in company history that they have swept from pole. A few more nuggets, then we go to the crew. Okay. Besides Bowman and his Hendrick team, the two most satisfied drivers in Daytona were former Hendrick champion and one of the biggest in action sports, Jimmy Johnson, and Travis Pastrana were the fastest of the two open non-chartered cars, clocking in at 23rd and 25th, respectively, to guarantee themselves a spot in the Daytona 500 field on their qualifying field. So, and a few other things worth noting. Okay, while Johnson will make his first Cup start since the end of the 2020 season, the Daytona 500 will mark Pastrana's NASCAR Cup Series debut and fulfill a lifelong dream of his, as he discussed at CBS Sports in the lead up to the Daytona 500. Pastrana was exuberant as he emerged from his car on pit road, exhaling in celebration before sharing a congratulatory embrace with Johnson. A couple more things, then I go to George and I go to Jeremy. While Johnson and Pastrana have locked into the Daytona 500, four drivers will still have to race their way into the Daytona 500 through Thursday night. Dual qualifying races. Zane Smith qualify if he is the top opening driver in his duel, or he can lock in on his qualifying speed if he either Johnson or Pastrana are the top finishing driver. Austin Hill can qualify through the same scenarios, or if Pastrana and Zane Smith are the top open finishers in their duels, Chandler Smith and Connor Daly must race their way into the Daytona 500 after both drivers had mechanical issues in qualifying. So with that said, George, a lot to digest.
That's a lot to digest, Scott.
Yeah.
It looks like this is the diamond anniversary, 75 years for NASCAR. I tell you what, I think it's their final year with Fox and NBC too. So it's going to be an interesting race and an interesting year. That's for darn sure. And Daytona never one to rest on its laurels if you're racing in that race, man, because you can be passed. I looked it up, and there were 6,400 green flag passes. Imagine that, fellas. 6,400 green flag passes last year's race, which was not as crash filled as most of them are. So, Daytona, you're right, Scott. I am happy for you and Candy. This is going to be a great experience for both of you. Having been to the Indy 500 with you, I know how tremendous respect you have, and as well as Candy and Jeremy and I have for auto racing, right, Jeremy?
Yes, and you say that over 6,400 passes. That reminds me of rush hour in L.A.
That's right.
That's pretty funny.
Close to it, right?
Or when it's a log jam at Christmas time around 12 Mile in Detroit.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, stay with it, Jeremy. I want to hear more of what you just said.
Yeah.
That being said, the Daytona 500 has such a rich history. We've seen so many great champions come out of there from back when it was actually on the beach. And it was moonshiners getting together to race to see who had the fastest car on the sand. And those guys, that's where the original idea of the mud and sand terrain tires come. They had the tires made just for traction on the rear tires, like you see on the sand rail dragsters now.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's
so to go from racing on sand in a circle, and it was nowhere near as big as it is now. I mean, I think it was a 1 mile track that they did on the beach, because back then the beach was a lot bigger. It wasn't eroded away like it is now. So that 500 laps.
If anybody,
that's what they did.
Daytona Beach, you can drive your vehicles on. I should point out, folks, that the Sports Exchange can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. So please hit the red subscribe button for South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. Everyone helps. Thank you very much in advance. So with that said, let's break down the particulars. And yes, Jeremy, what did I forget?
Don't forget, not only do you hit the subscribe button, but you must like each video and share it with all the sports fans you know.
I know this guy can always pick me up. All right, well, let's talk about it. He does, and I'm thankful for it. All right, we'll go over some basic facts here. The purse for this race is $26,934,357. It goes 500 miles, 200 laps. Stage 1 ends at lap 65, stage 2 at 130, and the final one is at lap 200. So George, I want to ask you, what do you think of the stage procedure with NASCAR?
Scott, at first I didn't like it too much, but the more I watch it, I like it, because it gives the fans an extra incentive. It gives the drivers a chance. Also, if you're not doing too well and you need a little adjustment, I mean, obviously everybody gets reset for the next stage, and you don't get any of your accomplishments wiped out. I'm not saying that, but it just gives a more exciting finish, I believe, to the entire race when you take 3 separate races almost in one. And plus it gives a little break. Everybody needs a little break to catch their breath, or to run and get a Coke or a beer at the stadium, at the Speedway, or at home. It gives a chance for a little analysis on Fox or NBC, of course, the guys up in the booth. But I like it, Scott. I think the stages are good. I think that NASCAR is always trying to see what they can do to retain but grow their audience as well, because especially the younger people, we know what a limited time frame a lot of young folks have in watching any sports at all.
What about you, Jeremy?
I think it is great for the fans, like George said, because that reset, it also gives a chance for those teams that lost a lap during a stage to get back in there and have that chance to move back up into the lead lap. Not saying that they'll win, but they're paid out by where they finish. Nobody wants to be the lap down or 2 laps down.
Yeah, it's taken me a while to get used to it, but like anything else, whether it's a rule change in baseball, football, you see it enough times and you don't have a problem with it. All right, this race is the 75th diamond anniversary for the NASCAR Cup Series. George, My goodness, it's pretty good.
Oh man, we were talking before the show started, Scott. Remember the three of us and Richard Petty and Cale Yarbrough and Benny Parsons and the list goes just on and on and on. 75 years is a hell of a long time, but again, that's less time than the NFL. That's less time than Major League Baseball, but that's okay. NASCAR has had, pardon the expression, a checkered past.
Right.
I mean, some years have been good, some have been bad. Of course,
Right.
we all know the terrible death of Dale Earnhardt Sr.
Right.
And, other guys that have died, especially when the safety features were just not as good as they are today. And so there's been a lot of tragedy around. But I tell you what, I've never been to Daytona, Scott, but and Jeremy knows I've been to Michigan International Speedway. They do a hell of a fine job. It's unfortunate they're down to just one weekend. I should say, not one race, but one weekend. And that's unfortunate. Maybe someday that would get back to 2 NASCAR races in June and August, but they're down to just the one in August. So the times I've been, I've really enjoyed it. And I think salute to them. I mean, 75 years, it's a hell of a long streak and it's a great product.
I hate that they're reducing a super speedway to one race per division is what I'm getting at.
Right.
Because the non-restrictor play racing at a super speedway is so much more fun than watching them run at 80 to 120 miles an hour in a half-mile circle.
Yeah, well, I can tell you right now, Daytona's unbelievable. I enjoy the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but boy, the more I come to this place, the more I really, really like it. I still am proud of the Rolex 24. That's why I wear this hat.
Let's talk about a few more of the greats that have won in Daytona. You've got Jimmy Johnson. You've got Dale Earnhardt Sr. and Jr. And I can't imagine what it would be like to finish the race.
Jeff Gordon. Let's not forget the great Jeff Gordon.
Jeff Gordon, Sterling Marlin.
Well, Michael Waltrip's done well there,
Michael
too.
Waltrip,
Yeah.
Bill Elliott. Bill Elliott was the first one to break the 200 mile per hour at Daytona.
Yeah, you know what? I was over in Arizona when Dale Earnhardt was fatally injured, and it was too bad.
Didn't Junior win that race too?
No, actually, I believe it was Michael Waltrip.
Oh yeah, he got. It was the first time Dale Jr. finished in the top 3 at Daytona. That's what it was.
Right, but during that race, Dale Earnhardt Sr. was protecting his son and Michael Waltrip. It's unfortunate he didn't see the end of it. So, it's unreal, But I think that after that particular race, that you began to see the soft walls and the Hans device and all that. So there were some radical safety changes.
There had to be, yes, there were, exactly.
Yeah, because when you watch that wreck, it didn't look as disastrous as it ended. We have seen lots of wrecks that were way worse than that and never seen a death in NASCAR.
Right.
And that was just, it blew my mind.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, just so you know, coming up after the Sports Exchange, we have Inside the Pigskin. So I hope you can join us for that. There are a few other things I want to get to tonight. Daytona 500 pole, our first starting position, winning 0% of 14.06%, produces more winners, 9 than any other position. So that's a pretty startling, interesting statistic, George.
So the 14th?
Derek, hey, that's okay.
You said 14th position? Through what?
The Daytona 500 pole, or first starting position, winning percentage of 14.06% produces.
Percentage.
Oh, okay, percentage. Okay.
Yeah, the guys.
I thought you were saying
that makes sense. That makes sense.
And I think it's 9 through 20 has produced the most winners, right?
I believe so. I'm just going by some of the research that I have.
Because if you think about it, Dale Earnhardt never wanted to win the pole. Right. He would always run in that top 10 to 20. But he'd finish first there a lot.
Yeah. Oh gosh, did he ever? I mean, don't forget there's a nice sizable bonus when you're the pole sitter as well. Let's not.
Oh yeah,
let's not lose sight of that. So
yeah, there's guys that want that because they want that bonus money.
Right.
But if you look at 99.9% of them that win it, they don't win the pole. They don't win the race. In the 80. Wait, let me do the math. 85.4% of the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, just according to the score, I want to put these names out there, and I don't mind giving some sources here, but they say past champions, future Hall of Famers, and young drivers want to add Harley J. Earl Trophy to their resumes, but there are just seven active drivers captured the checkered flag at the Great American Race. Now, I'm just going to mention four drivers as we move along here. Ryan Blaney, and win at the Daytona 500 is beginning to feel inevitable for him. And then we have Chase Elliott, the sport's most popular driver, has 2 wins at Talladega and a victory at the Super Speedway at Atlanta, but has yet to break through at Daytona. We'll see if that changes. A couple other names worth bringing out there. Bubba Wallace, the driver of the number 23 Toyota, has emerged as one of the most consistent threats on super speedways in recent years. And the last one worth mentioning is Ryan Preece. Not many drivers getting second chance in the Cup Series and even get one fewer, better equipment. But Tony Stewart pushed for Preece to usurp Cole Custer in the number 24 Haas Racing Ford. So it's time for Preece to make the most of his opportunity. Some names worth watching over the weekend. All right, George.
Well, yeah, that, and again, that happens in a lot of sports, guys that never got to the World Series, guys that never got to the Super Bowl. I think that out of all those four guys, I would think Chase Elliott would probably be my, if there's a favorite of mine to break that jinx and to get into the winner's circle. I mean, he's got a great team. He's got a great ownership group, and he's on a great first class A1 team. I think that unfortunately, like you were reading the names off, Bubba, I mean, I'd love to see Bubba win. That'd be a great story. And don't get me wrong, I would be wonderful if he did also. But out of those names, I guess I would say my biggest surprise is Chase Elliott. But again, it's one of those things where sometimes you just got to wait in your career. And some guys never made it into winner's circle, victory lane at the Daytona 500. So I don't know. It's bound to happen in most of their careers if they're really, really good. But sometimes it gets by them.
Oh yeah, man. I haven't. It's been a rough day. That's all I can say.
It's all right,
I got some things going on.
Okay.
Sorry, I missed part of the question and.
Go ahead, George. Start with them again.
Yeah, we were just talking about guys in their careers, Jeremy. Like Scott had mentioned 4 or 5 names that never been able to win the big one at Daytona.
Oh yeah, I mean, and they've won plenty of the smaller races. You know what I'm saying? And they end up in the chase, but they don't end up a champion overall. There's a lot of things that go to that. There's car issues. There's everything. And then what if you get wiped out? Some of those guys have been some of those do not finishes.
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. When there's an accident or something, you guys have seen that so many times where a favorite or co-favorite, is wiped out, and your chances are gone if the car can't, continue.
Wasn't there one time at Daytona on the first lap, like a 25 car pileup the one time? And then there was another one that was almost 30 cars for Talladega, those super speedways. If somebody gets loose at the wrong time, especially when they're bunched up like that, it's horrible for the sport overall and the product that they're able to put on TV.
Well, it's amazing how you say Talladega. This last race that Candy and I attended was a relatively clean race. I didn't see the big one, as you would say, take place. All right, so let's continue on here. Setting the field for the Daytona 500 is like any of the race. A single car can qualify on 215, have 2 rounds. Top 10 qualifiers in round 1 move to round 2. The fastest 2 cars in round 2 will lock in as the front row starters, and then the rest of the starting grid decides blue, green, vacation duels, and obviously that's occurring tonight. So, George, any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, I like the order, that there's an order to things, as far as, moving on and that sort of thing from round to round. I also think that over the years, I mean, like I said earlier, NASCAR's tried a lot of different things with their races and transitioned to different types of strategies, if you will. They've not been afraid. That's what I like about NASCAR. They've not been afraid to move forward with good thinking. And obviously, they've got a huge rules committee, and they've had to consult with team owners and drivers and rules people and stewards and everybody else involved in the sport when they make rules changes. But no, as we talked about earlier, I do like the stages, and I think that it's healthy for the sport to have those stages. And it's a long season, guys. Come on, this is like what, 34 races or something. But there's a lot of stamina involved, and I think NASCAR, and especially at Daytona, they're doing it right.
Ab- Absolutely. I mean, most of the rule changes that they've done in NASCAR is for the safety and the well-being, not only of the drivers, but the cars themselves. They're expensive. You're talking about an 800 horsepower block engine that's not available at the factory, but they have to make X amount of blocks of that motor to be able to put it into the 20 to 30 cars that each manufacturer has.
Hello, Jennifer Matthews Lewis. Thank you very much for joining us, Jen.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, Jennifer.
She had a pretty productive time at the Super Bowl, so proud of Jennifer and everybody at Sideline Sports who are really hustling, doing well there. So
they did great.
Yeah, they did.
More power to every one of them. All right, a couple other points here before we go to parting shots. Last year, Austin Cindric's Daytona 500 winner was first in the NASCAR Series win, and the first rookie in series history to win the Daytona 500. Man, I'll tell you, drivers go a long time without doing it, and this guy ended up getting it done. That just blows me away.
Yeah, and he drove for our friend Roger Penske from Penske Motorsports. And Roger's got a NASCAR team. As we know, he's heavily involved in IndyCar. But Roger is, back again with his NASCAR team. Very competitive sport. You got Toyota, you got Ford, you got Chevrolet fighting for the manufacturer's title, and you got a lot of stuff going on in NASCAR. But Austin Cindric, not who I expected to win last year, but good for him. And those 6,400 green flag passes from a year ago.
Wow.
Unreal.
It was good. It was good. The kid, and like you said, Scott, guys go their whole careers, and we were talking about that with Jeremy. They go their whole career. They don't get. Then a rookie comes in and flash.
It flashes right up to the top, and then they're a flash in the pan and don't do anything. Usually, a lot of those rookies don't do anything the rest of the season.
Yeah,
that's true. Hey, but you know what, Jeremy? If you win the Daytona 500, to me, that's pretty good stuff. I guess we can relate to it back home when Michigan when they beat Ohio State. If you do anything, you got to go out there and beat Ohio State. Have a great year. So,
hey, how great is it that we get to say it's been over 1,200 days since Ohio State beat Michigan?
Yeah, all right. Yeah, when those kind of facts, they never get by you. All right, one other point I want to get to: Kevin Harvick will retire from full-time racing. After the season, he'll join Fox Sports booth on NASCAR TV as an analyst. Well, my good. Fox Sports is pretty good, isn't it? When you go out there and you bring on Tom Brady, let's bring on Kevin Harvick and everybody else. So, all right,
I think that Kevin Harvick has been a great driver, a big asset to NASCAR. This is his farewell tour, and I know those things are always quite emotional. We're going to have one here in Detroit by the name of Miguel Cabrera. And of course, we had him with NASCAR with so many great drivers. I remember when Jeff Gordon's farewell tour. And like I said, Harvick, I don't know much of his talents, to be honest with you, as far as a broadcaster goes. I guess that probably means somebody else will be moved out. I feel bad for whoever is going to be moved away if they make room for Harvick. But all that being said, he's had a great career, Scott. And Jeremy, I think Kevin's going to hopefully have a good year this year. And welcome back also Jimmy Johnson, who just could not cut the mustard in the IndyCar. And Jimmy's back with the team, as you talked about, Scott, earlier with your
I don't know about cutting the mustard. Right now, I've spoken to Jimmy Johnson, and he's more of a bucket list guy. He wants to try everything that he can before his days are over. So I'm not going bucket list on this guy.
I think he should try drag racing next.
You never know. Hey, I spoke to him during the Rolex, and this guy here is a bucket list kind of person, is really, really what he is. And you never know. We all know that Harvick took over when Dale Earnhardt was unfortunately killed. and for children's racing. So, Jeremy, some thoughts on Harvick?
Harvick was the one that took over the Mr. Goodwrench car after Dale Earnhardt passed away.
Right.
And they were going to give him the 3 to begin with, but the family says, no, that's our license. We have that. So they ended up giving him, 29 to start his career. Is he still 29 now?
I have no idea. But people in Detroit,
But
Mickey Loge.
he's been a great personality when he's interviewed after wins and losses, whatever. I think he may do well in the broadcast booth just because of his demeanor when he's in front of the camera.
Well, Jeremy, let me tell you something. You talk about different sports that you cover, but NASCAR and auto racing drivers, they're some of the kindest people you'll ever deal with, these people, because they want to promote their sport and they're very hungry to do it. So
99% of them come from south of the Mason-Dixon line, where they are all about. When I live down south, the people are all about being polite.
Right.
It's like, when you're walking down the road, people in their car, if they notice you walking, they actually wave at you. It's not like up here where they shy away or look away. Oh, they must not have anything.
Yeah. Well, I got news for you. They're starting to come from California too. So, below the Mason line in Midwest, but that's but they're still hungry for their publicity, is what they really, really are. Mm-hmm. And as a result, that's one of the reasons I love to go back with these guys. They're just a pleasure to deal with. George, any thoughts on Harvick before we go to parting shots?
Yeah, I think it is amazing that these years pass so fast. Jeremy, I'm glad you brought that up, and Scott, about Harvick and succeeding Dale, the great Dale Earnhardt Sr. I've admired Kevin. I mean, I think he's been very, like you said, Scott, they're very amicable. They're good people most of the time. You and I have walked the garages. Jeremy, I'm sure you have too. I mean, when you go inside the garage area and if you got credentials for the pits, I mean, that's a little different story because everybody's getting ready for the race. Right. But the drivers are very nice, and another sport that's like that, guys, is hockey. Hockey players are also like that, very, very amicable and fun to talk to.
Well, they'll get paid a lot of money. You might as well promote the sport. They're one of the lower paying major sports, so you might as well do everything you can to bring on a very good professional image. I've dealt with a lot of hockey players. I've got nothing against them whatsoever. So all right, well, it's time for parting shots. Mr. Ballrick, lead off.
Well, what about that Super Bowl? Mahomes winning 2 out of 3 Super Bowls in his first 4 years. I mean, that's pretty impressive. He's on his track. And I think when they did that Madden 23 or 22 commercial with Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes sitting there, they got it right when they called him. When they flashed to the animals, it was a goat and a baby goat, which is known as a kid.
Okay. All right, George.
My parting shot. I tell you what, and I alluded to a little bit earlier. Michigan International Speedway is too much of a jewel to be silent for so much of the year, okay? And I know it's extremely costly and extremely involved, but I also know that NASCAR owns and operates most of these tracks themselves. That being said, there's no reason why Michigan cannot. Now, they had more stands at one time, and they took down stands because they couldn't fill them. But the fact that the IndyCar stripped away the Michigan 500, whatever it was called back in the day, back in the day it was only a 200-mile race when you look back at the IndyCar race. But to take away our second NASCAR race weekend, no, we're the automotive capital of the world, the state of Michigan and Greater Detroit. And my 2 cents would say somehow take a look at that schedule. And I know a lot of cities are vying for these races. But Detroit and Michigan, let's get back in the groove and get a second race.
Oh, yeah. No debate there. I love MIS, first track I actually worked out of with you, and they should have too. All right, last Thursday we did a show with Ted Dawson, the former LA Sports broadcaster. So now he brought on something that they didn't have any local presence in terms of a broadcaster in Boise, Idaho. Well, guess what? This one will shock you, okay?
Uh-oh.
At noon on March 21st, 1949, WTVJ started broadcasting common sportscasters, here in South Florida. Some of the broadcasters that have gone through WTVJ include Kerry Ross, who's married to Dave Dombrowski, Chris Myers, Tony Segreto, Roy Firestone, and of course, to me, it was just, you had a lot of iconic people over there. On Sunday night, Ruthie Polinsky, okay, who's born in Ann Arbor, went to the University of Michigan, will do the final sportscast at 11 p.m. There will be no local sports anymore. Local TV sports in a major market has become obsolete. In a major sports market, sports will only appear in the newscast when relevant and done by the anchors. Polinsky is the last of the 4 sports anchors remaining over at WTVJ, which is the NBC affiliate. Unbelievable. That it just goes to show you that unfortunately local sports is devalued in a lot of major markets, and we all know it happens to be a money thing. But to me, it's sad. Now I know Ruthie; she's a very talented young lady. She'll get a job somewhere else, and they offered her another contract, but she said, "Nah, it's okay. I'll look for other options." So, when Ted Dawson brought it up, here we go, deja vu. Okay,
Yes.
but this one in a major market. Bernie Rosen was a guy who I met over with the Miami Hurricanes and the Dolphins, and he mentored a lot of people there. So, it's sad to see the way this industry has really turned out. And, it's when local sports is being laid down to about 1 or 2 minutes, that's just completely unfortunate. So, with that said, I'll go over our information, then I'll let George and Jeremy go ahead over there. So I just want to let everybody know that the Sports Exchange can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. So if you're on the road, whether you're walking, subway, whatever, that's how you can do it. Also, please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 8,000 subscribers. And yes, as Jeremy reminds me, go ahead and hit the like button and share it with your friends. Don't worry, Jeremy. I do get it after enough repetition with you. And I love it when you grill me in to make sure we get that. With that said, I'll segue to Mr. Jeremy. Go ahead.
Well, you can find me on the SouthFloridaTribune.com under the Motor City Tribune heading with the list of authors with great guys like George Eichhorn and Scott Morganroth himself. You also can find me on Kneecap Biting with Smokin' Jeremy B, where I do an every other Wednesday during the off-season NFL Roundtable Talks, and on Fridays, my Lions Fan Cave chat. Then you can also find me here on South Florida Tribune on whatever show he wants to put me on.
And also, I should give my Twitter information. If you're watching the broadcast, you can follow us on Twitter at Tribune South, or emails www.southfloridatribune.com. That's a website. The email is southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And kudos to Candy Ebling, who does an unbelievable job with every aspect of what we do, because without her, we'd have difficulties. And last but not least, Mr. George Eichhorn has a book to talk about. Go ahead. The floor is yours, George.
Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. It's available for the low price of $19.99 at most locations. And there's a link to it on the website for the South Florida Tribune and the Motor City Tribune. As Jeremy mentioned, I'm a writer there as well. And you'll see a tagline at the end of my column. It was a fun thing writing this book. The couple guys that I think about, there's a picture in here, Bob Sherman. Bob Sherman was a fixture at Michigan International Speedway. He was the track announcer for a long, long time. And there's another guy that I can't forget, and his name is Vito LaPiccolo. And Vito had his own Motor City Motorsports show. Chris McClure is another one from Metro Detroit who loved auto racing. And I know you did too, Scott. And Scott, it's great having you in the book too, with Muhammad Ali and Jimmy Connors. And I can be reached at Twitter as well, at SandGSports99, or geichhorn@yahoo.com. You can read me in the pages of the Downtown Monitor. And it's great being on the show again. Thanks for having me.
Well, George, you're a fixture. Then again, you have been with me for 43 years. And Jeremy, you're a fixture anyway. So sleet, snow, or whatever, this guy made it, and I'm proud of him for getting it done. So
I did better than FedEx.
Thanks for staying alive. Yeah, for us. For
Yeah,
sure.
you did really well. And
Oh.
Jennifer Matthew Lewis for popping in the chat as well. So on behalf of George Eichhorn, Smoking Jeremy V, my name is Scott Morganroth, Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange. And we look forward to doing the post Daytona 500 in about a week. So everybody have a great night. And it was great work being with y'all tonight. Take care, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.